Hello, welcome to netvn channel. This video will show you how to create a backup server for your Nextcloud private storage cloud. With this approach, if the main Nextcloud server fails, the backup server will be replaced immediately. And so you can still connect to your cloud data. Until the main server is fixed, the cloud data is automatically synchronized. So your work is not interrupted even though one of the two servers is down. The data between the two servers is always synchronized in real time. In this video I use two servers using Ubuntu operating system. In this example the IP address of the primary cloud host is 10.11.32.129. The IP address of the backup Nextcloud server is 10.11.32.130. The virtual IP address for the two cloud servers is 10.11.32.20. First you create virtual IP address 10.11.32.202 for two servers with Keep Alive. You install Keep Alive on both primary and backup servers. After the installation is complete, create a new Keep Alive configuration file on both servers, then you add the lines as above. You notice there is a difference between the two servers. One server is master and one server is backup. Priority is different. Here main server has higher priority. You configure the virtual IP address on both servers to be the same 10.11.32.202. The priority on the primary server is 255 and the priority on the backup server is 254. The main server has higher priority, so under normal conditions it will own a virtual IP address. Also you configure the same password on both servers. You use the key combination CTRL-X then select Y to save and close the Keep Alive configuration file. One more thing you need to keep in mind is to select the interface that you want to assign a virtual IP address to it. Then you start the Keep Alive service on both servers. As I check, main server is using virtual IP address 10.11.32.202. I would check if the IP address is automatically assigned to the backup server by stopping the Keep Alive service on the primary server. You will see that the virtual IP address will be immediately assigned to the backup server. After checking, remember to start the Keep Alive service on the main server to return the virtual address to the main server. The next step is to install and configure the database on the two servers. You install the MariaDB database software on both servers. Once MariaDB is installed, open the configuration files on both servers and edit them as above. By default, MariaDB only allows use on the server itself, so you need to allow remote access to the database by removing the bind address configuration. You identify the database to distinguish between the two servers. Here I identify the database on the main server as 1. And the database identifier on the backup server is 2. Also you enable logging on both databases of the two servers. Don't forget to save your changes before closing the database configuration files. Next, I will show you how to synchronize the database between two servers. First, you assume the database on the main server is primary and the database on the backup server is the server. On the main server, you create a rep user account and grant replication permission. The backup server will use this rep user account to sync the database with the primary server. In addition, you need to add information about the database on the main server such as IP address, username, password, login position. Then you start the slave on the backup server and check the database slave status. If you see a message with the word yes as above, you did it right. But so you can only synchronize the database from the main server to the backup server and not synchronize the database from the backup server to the main server. That is, treat the database on the backup server as the master and treat the database on the primary server as the slave. You just need to perform the same steps as in the previous step, but you need to update the IP address to 10.11.32.130. After the configuration is done, you start the slave mode on the main server and check the status. Just like the backup server, if the above appears on the main server, you did it right. At this point, the databases of the two servers are synchronized in real time. Any database changes on one server will be synced on the other. Next, on any server you create a database for your cloud storage. Here I create a new database and name it Nextcloud. Then create a new username and user, then grant permissions to the newly created Nextcloud database. You can check on the other server and see that the database changes have been synced between the two servers. At this point I have finished the instructions on installing and configuring the database. Next step, I will guide you to use Gluster to sync Nextcloud folder between two servers. You install Gluster on both primary and backup servers. After the installation is complete, start the Gluster service. Next, you enable the Gluster service to make sure it still works when the server restarts. Before synchronizing folders together, you need to peer-to-peer using Gluster. You are peer-to-peer using the remote server's IP address. On the primary server, you use the backup server's IP address for peer-to-peer connection. Here the IP address of the backup server is 10.11.130. After successful peer-to-peer connection, create a shared folder for both servers. The shared folder here I named Vol1. After configuring the shared folder, you should check if it was successful or not on the backup server. Once you have a shared folder for the two servers, mount it where you will store Nextcloud. To prevent the mount from being aborted if the server reboots, you update the mount with the File FS tab. You update the IP address corresponding to each server. As in this example, IP address of primary server is 10.11.32.129 and IP address of backup server is 10.11.32.130. After you have completed the FS tab configuration, the mounts are maintained even if the server is restarted. Next, you install PHP on both primary and backup servers. In addition, Nextcloud also uses a lot of PHP modules, so you need to install it fully. Otherwise, error will occur when you use Nextcloud Storage Cloud. You install PHP and PHP module packages on both servers. After installing PHP, download the latest Nextcloud file to the directory var www. To know which is the latest Nextcloud file, visit Nextcloud's homepage. As at the time of this video, the latest version is 23.0.3. Because the two servers are peer-to-peer, the compressed Nextcloud file will appear on both servers. Next, you extract the Nextcloud file and copy it to the current directory. After waiting for a while, both servers will appear a new folder named Nextcloud. Don't forget to grant permissions to these folders. You would create a config file called Nextcloud on both servers to tell Apache where to store the Nextcloud folder. Two Nextcloud files on two servers with the same configuration. You update the virtual IP address for the config file. In this example, the virtual IP address is 10.11.32.202. Don't forget to save and close the config file you just created. To the last steps of the video, when you want to access the cloud storage from the internet, you will replace the virtual IP address with the domain name. Then enable the newly created configuration file on both servers. For the changes to take effect, restart Apache 2. Next, use any web browser and access the Nextcloud storage cloud with a virtual IP address 10.11.32.202. Here you create a new admin account for your Nextcloud. Then find the information about the previously created database to complete the Nextcloud configuration. In the previous step, I created a database named Nextcloud, username is nkuser and password is 123456. You use the above information so that Nextcloud can connect to the database. You need a few minutes to wait for Nextcloud to initialize the new storage cloud. I will delete all the data available on the cloud storage, then upload a new file for you to observe the data synchronization between the two servers. Like here, I will upload an image file of a cat and we will see if it syncs with the backup server. I will power off the main server, so the virtual IP address will be assigned to the backup server. When the main server is down, the backup server will be replaced immediately. As you can see, your data has synced to the backup server. I will upload another photo file of the penguins. Will the data be synchronized when the main server is powered on? Before testing that, I would open the port on the router and use the domain name to access the private cloud hosting anywhere over the internet. You open port 80 and 443 on your router. The IP address to configure the port opening is a virtual IP address 10.11.32.202. Opening this port is very familiar on my YouTube channel netvn. If you do not know, you can review the previous videos. Next, to get a domain name I use DuckDNS service. Also, I have updated my public IP address for that domain. You watched the previous videos to know how to install DuckDNS on Ubuntu, or refer to DuckDNS homepage for how to do it. Currently, I have prepared a domain name netvncloud.duckdns.org. By default, Nextcloud only allows access from virtual IP addresses, so you need to add trusted domains. Here I allow access to cloud hosting from any domain name or IP address. You can also configure each domain name or each IP address if you want. As mentioned in the previous section, if you want to access your cloud storage from the internet, you need to modify the Nextcloud configuration file on both servers. You replace the virtual IP address with your domain name. You update the Nextcloud configuration file on both primary and backup servers because this configuration file is not synchronized with each other. You save the changes, then restart Apache 2 for the changes to take effect. You open any web browser and access your private cloud hosting with your domain name. That way you can access your own cloud storage from anywhere over the internet. As you can see, the image file of the penguin has appeared, and so the data has been synchronized two-way between the two main servers and the backup server. Here I have started the main server and checked if the new data is synced or not. Data is important to you, so you will encrypt communications by enabling HTTPS. If you have watched my previous videos, you will be very familiar with how to enable HTTPS with Let's Encrypt. After you have installed Let's Encrypt on both servers, you configure them. First, you configure on the main server. To avoid errors, you turn off the backup server. To configure encryption, update the domain name, then fill in the requested information. You will be asked to enter your email address and then choose, as I am doing, to complete the communication encryption configuration. When you receive the congratulatory message, you have succeeded. Once you access your cloud storage, there will be a lock icon next to the address bar. But you only configured encryption on the primary server, now you configure it on the backup server. To avoid errors, turn off the main server and enable HTTPS on the backup server. You use the same command to configure on both servers. That's it, I have finished showing you how to build your own storage cloud with Nextcloud. This way you will have a primary server and a backup server. If something goes wrong with one of the two servers, the other is replaced immediately, and data is synchronized in real time. Thus, your work is maintained continuously even though there is a problem. Thank you for watching, good luck. Don't forget to like and subscribe to netvn channel. Once you've built your private cloud server, use Nextcloud clients on your computer or smartphone to access the cloud from anywhere. With Nextcloud, in addition to cloud data storage, you can also add good applications to use.